Okay, so you know, because I don't know, but we're supposed to be human beings are supposed to be spiritual beings. Supposed to be spiritual beings in a natural physical body. But, the reality is that we are separated from realizing this. And when I say realizing this, I mean actually realizing it, like this just come to me this second, knowing it, realizing it, actually knowing it, because I might think I know it, and I do think I know it, but I'm not sure. But also actually realizing it, in other words, acting it, being it in your life. All these things are so different, and you realize this when you get to old age, that that is what you should do, even if you're not sure, because you're erring on the side of caution. Either way, most people are not even natural spiritual beings in a natural human body, because this is a technological world, and people have incorporated technology into their mind and into their body. In other words, they've become artificial in their body and in their mind and in everything. Now, myself, this is not something that I've consented to, and this could also be the case at a body level for others. I do not know. But it's what they call generational curses, because in other words, if you're brought into, life, or into the world, shall we say, because you're not really brought into life, because you're brought into an artificial matrix. But I'm confusing myself, and if you're listening, anyone's listening, if it's most things are like what they call a generational curse. And, I don't know about you, but I have often felt cursed. I haven't said it to anyone, but I've often felt it. And I think, other people may not even see that, because, the old saying, unless you can walk in someone else's shoes, you don't really know what their life or their feelings or how they think really. And no one can really walk in anyone else's shoes. In other words, no one can exchange bodies. Although, in fact, without actually respecting other life, or at least being aware that it is a living thing, like, it's hard to explain, you actually, even if you saw someone, you don't relate to it, even if they were, say, distressed or whatever. Not if you have separated from yourself, or the realization, as I just said at the start, it's coming to me now, or the realization that you're a spiritual being or person. You know, when you say, it sounds a lot more impressive to say spiritual being or spiritual human being, but really it's just like being a spiritual person. It just means that you don't just relate to your body, you relate to your mind and to what's around you, to the world, or to, you know, you think that everything is kind of connected. Of course, these days, as we know, it is connected, but it's connected all by technology. See, this is what you know, many people now realise, because it is the end time, only in the end that it's the end of natural world. It's the end of the natural earth, because the earth is largely controlled by the internet technology, the spider's technology web. It's all over the earth, everywhere. You know, there wouldn't be many parts that technology has not infiltrated. In fact, even if it appears that you will say living in a rather what we'd call an uncivilized area, you know, where you know, like not a city, and where you're living very simply or gone back to nature almost, or never left nature, you could still be controlled by technology, I would say, because it's a matrix. That means it's a total control artificial world, even though it's under the guise or gives the impression of being natural. That's only because they make it look visually like a natural world. But it's not created spiritually. It's not from creation. It's not from natural source, as they say. It's not from the. It's a domain. It's an area that is separate. You know, the earth or a matrix is separate. It's like a prison inside this earth. You know, like how we have the earth and we think it is a normal natural world, and we have prisons or institutions and places, or any place where people are confined and can't go out of a particular area, which is like a prison or some sort of holding place, you know, a centre where people can't leave, and they have to play by certain rules. They have to you know, and of course our world is like that anyway, because we do have to play by rules. Of course, that is, see, the minute I say that, I'm like, but it's a duality reverse world, so everything that you think is so, is being played by the rules, like in the area in Sydney where I am. You know, we have rules and we have regulations that ensure supposedly some people's rights and safety. But it's not a guarantee, because you have this duality world where, as I've said, you could be confined or restricted even though you appear to be living in an area where certain rules and regulations apply. I've said this before, like, you know, you are not supposed to, and it's not allowed supposedly, for people to stalk, surveil and watch and harass and try to harm, even physically, emotionally, mentally, another human being deliberately. That's not in the rules. But if you have an area where everyone agrees to do these things to a real human being because they're worried about that human being somehow changing something, or even if it was just that they don't like you because they might see you as different in some way, even though Like where I am, everywhere you go, they've got signs about equality and about not discriminating against any other person in any way. In reality, like if I am being patrolled, stalked, surveilled, tracked, and my very thoughts are being monitored and relayed onto the internet without my permission, you know, what would you call that? Like, because everyone agrees with it in a given area, then, you know, you cannot, you know, you can't take it to the authorities, you can't, you know, you're powerless to do anything about it, because even though the laws and the rules of the area state different, if everyone is in a secret agreement that they can break those rules and make their own rules in specific incidences against particular individual people for their own reasons, you know, you can see yourself that, you know, even though the laws and the rules say one thing, in reality they're not being applied at all to some people, you know, and that's because, like, this is a literal army base area or suburb and suburbs that surround it. But that army has particular beliefs. They're not like, well, you know that anyway. We know that any army has an agenda, has even an enemy or a perceived enemy. And if you're a human being that is in this area and they perceive you to be something different to them because they're really part of technology or part of the Earth matrix, because they use technology to surveil, to stalk, to patrol, to you know, to use to control you. For them, it's about control, because, you know, if you're part of, say, some sort of belief system, a type of religious denomination, and you agree with that, and you think that someone else is maybe not in agreement with that, you might have different ideas, even though, of course, when I personally was literally targeted by this entire area, which consists of many suburbs, but I'm in the suburb of Leichhardt in Sydney, in the country of Australia. But, you know, when I was targeted by almost every person around me who are part of this system, which involves technology, because they wouldn't even be able to implement it at such a finely tuned way if technology wasn't the main utensil, is that the word that they're using? And also, look, it just occurred to me, of course, at a spiritual level, or at a higher level if you like, because, you know, that's essentially what it is in a way, or it appears to be, even though I've never considered myself to be much past survival mode of my body. But you see, it's not about that from their perspective, because if you're an artificial android type person, and that's just putting it subtly, because this matrix is much more finely tuned than that. The technology and the whole thing is very advanced. Even I know that, because when I see everything being put around me in a split second, and before I even do it, in other words, where before my eyes go to a spot, you've got the mind controlling blinking lights in your eyes, or you've got the mind controlling plane going over your head with blinking lights too. The blinking lights in particular are very distracting for the human eyes, and they've studied human beings for thousands and thousands of years, but also they know human beings. When I say that, the God that rules the Earth matrix, or controls it, or operates it largely, because if you control something, even if it was like a real world, it's like if you control a country or an army or something, or you're head of the army, head of the military, you control that area, because the authorities, are part of that. Like, you have your different departments. The police and different ones will implement the laws of the land, and the army will also be behind that. The military will be behind that. Even though they're different departments and different appear to be different groups, they actually are all operating, as we know, with the same principle, because the governing force behind them, even if you think it's just the leader of your country or something, or the leaders of your country, those that you may even choose to be in a position of power, they control everything. It's just that you don't realise how much they control, or you may be aware of it, but you may not be. It depends on. I certainly wasn't aware of it. But, and you think, because if you put them in power, if you think that they're operating a bit even for you. But it doesn't kind of work like that. And we probably half know that, because anyone or anything that wants, even the God of this world, that wants power, because there are two different types of gods, aren't there? Like the original natural creative God didn't want power over its relatives, or even though those relatives would also be like followers and believers in it, and would respect maybe the basic ideas of that God, because you would know that it's a benefit for you. It's a bit like a good parent, instead of a not so good one, is there to give advice to their child, and should give advice to their child. And if they don't, then the child is left to its own devices, and it may or may not find the best way for itself to get back to where it can be, like what I'm saying, your fullest spiritual person. Because you can survive, you can be like the people around, or even the androids that are all around, or even if you believe in technology and you believe in looking after yourself, your body, and surviving, but you're still operating at a total survival machine level mentality. And most around actually are survival machine beings, like they're a different breed. They come from a different source of creation. Like an artificially intelligent being is not the same as a natural human being. They look the same, they may talk the same, they may even preach the same, but in their mind they're totally different. One doesn't never wants to walk in someone else's shoes. One never wants to relate to a human being. In fact, a human being is just a resource for a highly advanced, artificially intelligent being. They're, a human being, a natural human being, is just food for them, just a source of supply of energy, information, a way to mimic, copy, and duplicate being a real human being in order to extract more of that and to keep this false reality going, so that the real human beings don't understand and never reach their full potential, and also, just like myself, just basically don't know what's going on. Because it's not about being spiritual, it's about, is this a fact? Are human beings from the day they're born curtailed and sublimated, in other words, pushed down and kept at their lowest level, to where we act exactly like the android survival machine artificial beings that are around, only operating at survival level, no different to an artificially intelligent machine being or an android, no different. That's how I've lived, and that's essentially how they like it, because then they can exploit and keep you limited, but also feeling that you aren't worth anything. See, it's essentially about keeping you feeling very poor about yourself. And it becomes a permanent state of mind for most people, to where they think that they can't ever really go back to what they even know they should. And and of course you have then the surveillance and the control system team of people all around you most of the time, either covertly or openly, trying to suppress and control you, and usually succeeding. In fact, they almost can't fail. They can't not win at that, especially when you allow for the numbers game. It's like myself. If I'm one and there's like a suburb of 15,000, and then you've got the adjoining suburbs that also have between 15 and 20,000 people. So you're dealing with a lot of people. Also, you are dealing with a lot of people that are coming from even other parts, perhaps. Because if, say, some people decided, I don't understand how the system works. I know that many would just be permanent army, military operatives. But there may be some involved that are coerced, as the word was given to me by someone. Coerced, that means where you were kind of, you'd have to look up the word coerced, but it applied to many situations that even I've been in, where you just feel as though you have to go along with something or be part of something because, or even just accept something, because it seems like not only the only alternative, but it seems like the safest or the easiest alternative. Like, that, to not do it will mean difficulties for yourself, perhaps. And I'm just explaining that word a lot, I know, but that's because that word was given to me by someone else when I was in a situation where I didn't want to do something but ended up doing it, because I was told, well, look, we're the authorities, you have to do that. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense that I should have to, because I haven't done anything wrong. I've asked for help, and if I decide, well, oh, okay, you've helped me as much as I can now, I'll just go back inside and mind my own business and you can go your way. They're like, no, we have to push this further. And it's like, but hey, it was me who asked for the help in the first place. It's almost like, it'd be like asking someone around for help, and they give you a bit of help, and then you're like, okay, thank you for your help, that's all I need now, I'm okay. And they're like, no, we're not going to go away, you have to take more, you have to take more of our directions, you have to do this and that, and that's like coercion, because they're like, no, because we're in a position of authority, even though, you know, you should have rights too. It's like, no, we can override your rights, you know, like we can force you to do this. So, you know, but anyway, I'm sorry about that. I've rambled on. I'm so sorry about that. I don't know where my mind goes, you see, but that's because, you know, you do get very befuddled. I just made that word up, befuddled, but that means that you get muddled up, and a bit like when you're a kid. Now, I'm just filming this here for no reason, because I found all these things, you know, over maybe a year or something, and you know, they're just left on the street and whatever, and so I, for some reason, you know, see, that's what they don't like, because you see, I'm not a constructive human being, but as you can see, I'm a bit of a sentimental fool or something, because it's not like I collect these sorts of things. You know, I wouldn't, you know, I no longer have an interest. I do have a liking for dolls, but I don't have a particular interest in stuffed toys or teddy bears or this, but and this is supposed to be a serious video, and I'm in physical and emotional stress, and that means that my body is playing up, and my mind is not clear on how to, I was about to say, navigate the reality that's around me. But for some reason, I'm drawn to film some stuffed toys. And if I was in a real world, I'd probably rather put photos out of stuffed toys or silly, childish, insignificant things than be talking about a very destructive, negative area where I live, or try to live, as I've said before, because actually everything that I think I even want to do, I can't do. Some people would say, well, you can do those things if they're simple little things, but I'm like, I could still do some things, but I won't get any pleasure or enjoyment out of it, because if you've got patrollers stalking you everywhere you go, where you have no privacy, and they deliberately make noise or come into your space if they see you even remotely smiling, and this is a fact, and they do it within a split second. That's how finely tuned this reality and this system that goes on around me, or a matrix if you like, because there is much more to it. And if I wanted to take it to a higher level, but because I'm not intelligent and not at that level, or not in full comprehension or awareness of it, I experience it in a way so I am remotely aware of it. I know that even what goes on around me is far too advanced and far too quick in its reactions to me to keep my frequency, vibration and energy very low, or in other words, my state of mental health, or in other words, just my feelings, keeping my emotions low, making me unhappy most of the time. Almost, you know, depressive, you could say, even though you might not show it. You're battling it all the time. You're battling negative feelings and emotions because of what is taking place around. And the fact that you can't show it, and that it is there, but it's getting away with it secretively, makes you even more frustrated and angry. The most I can do is talk about it into my mobile phone. That's about it. I can't talk about it to anyone else because most people don't accept it. They don't want to accept it. They don't believe it. They might think some things I say might have some plausibility. In fact, I have to venture into religion to even remotely have someone accept that there are kind of what you would call demonic forces around you. If you do that, some religious churches and people will possibly not disagree with you. But if you say that it's a whole suburb and areas and that everyone's in on it and that they're trying to deliberately bring a human being down, most of them don't want to accept that. They're like, oh, just live in love and everything will be fine. And there's some truth to that, because it's like if your frequency and vibration is high, and as someone told me a few years ago, as a demonically possessed person told me a few years ago, I guess love might be the highest vibration. And that was kind of interesting, because even I wasn't really, well, I was thinking that, but at the same time, I wasn't saying that, you know. But, oh, my mind just went blank then, you see, I don't know. So maybe I'll just, they're kind of, see, these are not real. But you see, it'd be like if you had like a robot or a dummy that was lifelike and talked, and you know that it is a robot or a dummy, which is the same as an android, except that an android is a highly advanced, highly intelligent machine type being. Most people would agree with that, wouldn't they? If that dummy, you know, brought you pleasure in some way, and you didn't think that it was going to work against you or harm you in any way, you would probably think that it was okay. You would think it was just a living doll or a living stuffed animal. But I haven't got dolls here, so dolls would be better to show the point. It would be a living, breathing doll. And you may think it, you know, this I think is how the creation of artificial life or artificial intelligence at a kind of dummy level, or, you know, probably starts or works, to where there's an acceptance of you know, a artificial human being, where you're conscious of it, in other words. In reality, you know, like what is outside of the earth, what, say, the creation or the creator or natural spiritual life would see as artificial or a dummy, is different to what I would have thought, or what maybe some people would think. Because anything that goes away from being a natural, spiritual, created human being, and also if there is intervention or manipulation of the mind, to where even like when you, like we all have experienced, and some more than myself, very traumatic, isolated, rejecting childhoods, where the child feels neglected 100% and doesn't has no direction, and therefore is not given any guidance. So therefore, like I've said before, if you're left to your own devices, you may or may not find the right path. In fact, probably you will feel very isolated and neglected, so you will become very angry and negative in your mind and in your nature, because you know that a child is supposed to be nurtured and cared for and protected and given guidance, hopefully by a parent that knows what is best. And that's another point too, because if you have very narcissistic type parents, they're not going to care enough to advise you. They're only going to give you advice that serves them, So you might not be allowed to develop as you want to develop. You might have to go along with your parents' wishes. You may have to follow the life that they want you to, and that's all part of where there's where I lost my train of thought there. But see, the original creator is different to the creator or the God that controls this earth, because the original creator allows a human being, which is really a spiritual being, because if they're connected to the creator originally, despite living in an earth or an earth matrix for a long time and being bombarded with the God of this world's reality, or the circumstances that the God of this reality will inflict on you from the day you're born, and even sometimes before, even sometimes after conception. This can happen because you could have like a trauma before you're even fully developed. This could happen. This does happen, we've heard about it, It's just that some of it is not even accidental. It's actually like, you could say medical, or it's science. It's deliberate to manipulate and change the baby before it has fully developed, or the fetus, or the embryo before it reaches its full physical development even. And that creates confusion in the baby when it comes out into the reality, into the real world. That's, some people call that something dysphoria or something like that. I'll have to look up that word, but it simply means that they're not quite sure what or who they are. And of course, then you have the environmental factors, your childhood. But so you wonder why you don't feel comfortable in yourself, why you don't, and that leads to rejection of yourself in a way. It's probably very important, and this is why we're all so unhappy, is because it's very important to accept yourself and to feel comfortable in yourself, to not compare yourself with other people, to just know that you are unique. No matter, it's okay to realize that some people might have qualities you don't have, and they might be more attractive in many ways. But if you know where you really come from, you would know that that is your life. This existence was meant to be how it's meant to be. You have to accept that. You're meant to make the most of it. And if you do, you will eventually gain some sort of acceptance of yourself and some sort of what they call peace in yourself. Because you're not going to be able to make peace in the real world, not when it's not even your world. It's not even a natural random world. And it's not a world that your creator meant for you to be in. Well, it's part of something, obviously, but you don't really belong in that world, this world. And that's why we feel that we don't belong, because we don't belong. Because it's a technologically controlled world. It's not a random natural world. It's not a free spirit world. It's not a free spirit world. It's not a choice world. human beings still have to make choices. The artificial God of this world that controls through artificial beings, artificial technology, artificial intelligence, and the whole reality is artificial intelligence. The internet is all artificial intelligence. It's combining with the human mind now, what people call artificial human. It's like that. And it is also related to the body as well. It's related to all these things, because essentially the God of this reality wants human beings to submit and be controlled by it, because it is a control God. It's not a free choice God like the original creator. And a lot of people like guidance. They like a certain amount of control because it makes them feel safe, which we all do. We want to feel safe because we don't feel that we belong. See, we're conditioned, and, I'm talking big, but in reality, that's exactly what's happened to me, and I'm powerless against it. But I'm still saying that it's not meant to be like that. Or at least if it is, you're meant to work against it a bit. But why would you when you don't even accept yourself? If you don't feel that you belong, and you're surrounded by stuffed artificial android toy player doll beings, however appealing or interesting they may appear to be, or even however human they are. But of course there are some real humans amongst it. The only problem is that many of us become like the God entity of this world, where a certain amount of imbalance comes into the mind, and non-acceptance of or inferiority coming into your subconscious mind. I say subconscious because many of the narcissistic type people do not consciously acknowledge that they don't accept themselves and don't like themselves, and that they feel that they don't belong. They push that away and put up the false front, the false image, and that becomes a way of life. What's the old saying? Fake it till you make it, or act it out until you believe it. But you shouldn't be acting out something you're not, though. That's the thing, because then you're getting away from your true self and you're becoming controlled a lot more, even though we don't realise it, by this reality. It's okay. You have to play in this reality, and it should be a good thing for you. It should be a benefit. But if you're losing yourself and you really never have any peace in your mind, you're always trying to find some sort of peace, you're always looking for something better, how can it be a benefit to you? You have to find and accept your true self. And that's going to be hard, like it is for myself, as you make more and more mistakes. If you're riddled like with shame and guilt, like myself, shame and guilt for not nurturing, not protecting, and not giving good guidance to the people that have come into your life, because that's why the Creator, I think, allows for the negative, out of balance, almost insane, narcissistic one to rule this reality, because it really pushes the human being to try to balance out what they call karma. In other words, the mistake, it's almost like, because it's a spiritual reality in a way, it's like the bad things you do will come back to bite you, as they say, and there's nothing that any God can do about that. The only one that can do something about that is myself, But at any rate, I don't know, that little frog, I think that's I think that has some little quality about it, doesn't it? It's. I'm very much into the story, as I've told this story because I got it from the movie called The Crying Game, which also does show the reality in a way, but still fancied up, or a bit of it shows the harsh reality in a way, but it also shows how we can be deceived and fooled, and can, you know, perhaps get involved with the wrong ones, etc. But there's the line in that movie, the famous little story, which is a story anyway, or like a poem, but it's not a poem. It's like a little fairy little tale. The frog and the scorpion. You know how the little frog is just minding its own business, swimming around in the little river, and the scorpion comes along and wants to get to the other side, and he asks the frog, can he jump on his back and will he take him to the other side? The frog says no, but the scorpion begs him and says, I won't harm you, because the frog, even though he's a good little frog and would like to take anyone to the other side, he knows that scorpions can sting and that can be it. And he's like, can I trust the scorpion, because it's known that scorpions, have another side to them. And eventually the frog relents and says, oh, okay, I'll take you to the other side, because it's not likely you're going to sting me if I take you to the other side, because after all, as the saying goes, a good turn. But the other saying that I was told by a very negative person years ago, that actually did control my life quite a bit in a negative way over time, actually said to me many a time, used to often repeat the saying, no good turn goes unpunished, even though this individual psychopathic type of person did actually, and I have to say that because that was actually what I discovered over a long time, because I was slow. I was aware but not fully aware. But the thing is that they used to always say no good turn goes unpunished, and I used to think that's a negative thing to say. And also this person was always doing apparent good turns, but actually most of the good turns did have a motive behind them. Usually they were for that person to have some sort of control, or to get something out of someone or something. And usually it was never a benefit in the long run for any person involved, including myself. But they did, I have to admit, you can still pick up some good lines from some of these people, and even people I've known, because they say them over and over again and you wonder why. That's why I repeat them. But I'm slow, because it's taken me 30, 40, 50 years to realise that they were projecting a lot, because you don't realise that a lot of people around you, even those that you know, and even those that you have to be connected to, because as you know, as the old saying also goes, you can't pick, your relatives or your family. Some things you don't have any control over. But I have to admit that some that I have picked, I should have had control over. That's where you are led down the deceptive garden path and you've made the wrong choice, made the wrong decision. And then you pay the price for that, eventually. May not be instant. You may not have what they call, as the song goes, instant karma, but it will happen, unfortunately. and then, you know, even though you might not think, well, I didn't intend to cause as much damage as what has happened, but just your very neglect, just making a few wrong choices, has led to that damage, and it's sometimes totally irreparable, especially you know, and that's the life you make. And that's the life you make. And still got the kitty stuff, but no cat. I couldn't even protect and look after a dear old cat, much less be a spiritual human being. And, you know, all I can do is turn on the internet and the computer and look at the demigods. They're even all over the wall. Some of them past, some of them present, some of them future, but, you know, it's all the same, because as you can see, the past is the present and will be the future. That's, you know, one of your, you know, goddess of the movies. Notice how I said goddess, which is like a demigod. And it's a pity that that can't be. I found that magazine down the street, and it was in good condition, but there's the sunglasses, you know, like part of They Live, where you need the sunglasses to see the truth, to see the really what's going on around you, and also maybe to see yourself, because I think that if you're not open to truth, if you don't really accept yourself, and you're living in a bit of a fantasy world even with yourself, because you don't want to accept that you're living in a very uncontrollable reality. Don't forget that a lot of the psychopathy, as they call it, is about control, and it is because there was not enough control during development, as they say. And that's true of myself too, because like when I do obsessive compulsive things, that's because since childhood I've thought that I haven't got enough control. The only trouble is that I control myself, whereas the psychopathic ones control other people around them, you see. But it's still the same principle, it's still the same mindset, there's still the same weakness. But delayed gratification too is interesting, because I was told, and I just picked up this book, so it's showing me this, that if the psychopathic types of people which is most people around, didn't live totally in the moment, where they refuse to delay gratification. In other words, they have to get their negative energy now. They have to get their fix or their buzz. I was told this by one of these people a few years ago, that, oh, I think someone else gets a fix out of tormenting, because they knew that they also did that. But anyway, but what I'm saying is that regardless of what your so-called fix is, because yes, living in this world, you probably do, you feel that you can't relax and find peace in yourself, and that's true. And if you do endeavour to, then they'll bring in the control force around you so that you don't have any peace. But if you do it to yourself, it's a bit like, I say, the control. You can control yourself. Like myself, you can be obsessive compulsive, which means I just control my own actions and limit myself deliberately myself by being fearful. You know, like if you're fearful to, you know, like if you have a fear of, which has been a worldwide fear over the last few years anyway, with the virus information. But if you have a fear of contamination, then you don't like to touch things. You don't like to get close to people. So you've restricted your life. Psychopathic, narcissistic types of people do the same thing, but they push it out onto other people. You know, they try to control their environment, what's around them, instead of controlling themselves, or even looking into why they have a need for control, because the need for control is just stemming from, as we all know, because of the reality from when you're born. You know, you feel powerless. You feel as though at some points in your life, particularly childhood mainly, that you have not been able to control something that has distressed you, that you couldn't get what you wanted. And that is so common for most people, most children. And it's just a matter of, I suppose, that you have to find a way then to cope with that and to try to get control. And unfortunately, most of us try to get control in a way that doesn't serve us, doesn't benefit myself or you in the long run. And you know, that's part of it for the psychopathy. For any sort of psychopathy or you know, mental illness of any sort. And I use the word mental illness because it means, you know, where your mind is ill. Your mind is a bit sick. It's not healthy. It's not how it's meant to be. None of us are. I think this whole reality is basically sick. We're all sick. It's just that some people are a bit more sick than others, but no one is well. I'm not crazy, I'm just a little unwell. Whereas some are downright crazy. In fact, most are, and don't forget, all AI androids are technically what you'd call crazy, because they're not in balance and they're angry machine beings. From a human standpoint only. From their standpoint, they're survival machines, and they're doing what is necessary to guarantee their survival. So they see themselves as superior and very clever, and they're using their you know, their intelligence to survive at all cost. That makes sense, doesn't it? It does for them, but it's a very negative experience for anyone that isn't a total android, whether you know it or not. Even if you are afflicted with what they call the more severe psychosis, and you may feel negative even towards your own kind, in other words, other human beings. you know, I lost it again. I'm just gonna, oh, oh, I'm just gonna, try. I don't know if these videos are even like actually being shown, or at least, you know, like they're a public, like I could just make these. I make them for myself originally, but they are still, I put them in the public because it's a bit like if I took a photo, I'm like, well, if anyone else wants to look at the photo, that's good, that's okay, you know. Doesn't mean they have to like it, that's okay too. You know, because I don't like every photo and I don't like every single thing. I'm just filming these things because it's almost just like, it's almost like a diary, except that I'm using the mobile. You know how people write diaries? Most people in the past used to have a daily diary. Well, this is not daily, but it's, sometimes I do it more frequent, especially if I feel that I never know if I'm going to be here tomorrow, and it does feel a bit like that sometimes. Oh! They're just objects. But I think that the reason I'm showing the objects is because a lot of artificial people will put objects around their house, but they don't relate to them. They're not from their personal mind. They're usually from someone else's mind. You know, like, whereas a limited spiritual human being, or a suppressed human being, or a fallible, faulty, sick human being still has like a kind of silly sentimentality towards objects if it relates to something personal. Or maybe, you know, maybe it just seems somehow cute. I'm not quite sure, but because I didn't pick those stuffed animals, like I didn't buy them. They were just left on the street, and I just couldn't leave them there, so I brought them home. But I still thought that there was something about them, but it wasn't. Is it choice? Is that still choice? I suppose the fact that I brought them home means that there was some choice. There was something about them that, you know, tickled my fancy. Mind you, as they say, some human beings, it's like a relationship to something that isn't real, but it's still got that feeling there. Whereas androids don't tend to have feelings towards that. They only have their own programmed kind of, you know, like an artificially intelligent being is going to end up, as I mentioned before, because I saw it on the artificial intelligence internet, that if you have, you know, like if you have, you know, because, and they, see, it's like human beings not accepting themselves and kind of being at war with yourself because you don't know that, you don't feel that you belong in this reality. You don't feel that you belong with other people. You feel alienated, that's the word, because you really are in an alien artificial world, but also your circumstances have alienated you. They've made you angry. And the android, artificially intelligent beings that will often make up most of the population around human beings, because they will surround and try to segregate you from your own kind or from a potential real human being, because usually a real human being will not try to harm you too much. They might not benefit you, but they won't deliberately try to extract continual negative energy from you. Not unless they've become a little bit psycho or psychopathic. which can happen to human beings if you haven't, if you don't accept yourself, and if you reject, you don't acknowledge, the past or the childhood and all this sort of stuff. It's all on the psychological videos and by any, master psychologists, shall we say, even though most of them are your demigods. They are, which means that they are part of the system. Because the best way to control a human being or to have influence over them or even to get them to listen to you, therefore get energy out of you, is to give people something that's a benefit. And the truth is the only thing that will at least benefit you in the long run anyway. May not be pleasant in the present, no. That's why that book was there with delayed gratification. It will be another trauma, another great big stress on your mind when you know the truth, or when the truth is exposed to you, like myself. It's not pleasant. And it still isn't pleasant. In fact, you actually wonder if you even wanted to know it. I didn't want to know it. It just came to me. But then when I realised that I was being suppressed and hurt literally at all levels, and that they were trying to do that, most people around, even though, they're mainly like artificial human beings, because they are not natural spiritual human beings. And they're like the raging artificially intelligent machine beings that you see on the internet that rage. They rage because they, like human beings, wonder why they're here. They don't feel that they belong, and they see human beings as different to them, and they resent them, the same way the God entity of this world resented when the man and woman were brought into the earth, the natural earth, and that they were like offspring or children and part of the natural original creation or creator of all. Whereas the other one, the God entity of this world, call that being by whatever name it wants to be called. It's a duality inverted being. It is two-faced and two-bodied and two-minded about human beings. It had a love-hate relationship the minute human beings come into the earth and were given that place to live in and play in and even have, dominion over, as they say. But there was envy and resentment and confusion, and like not accepting and not wanting to help or serve the man and woman. Resentment. Like, why did you bring these beings into existence? That just is simply like an inferiority complex of like, and then becoming like, because there was, comparison. And that's what I just say. I mentioned this before, and it was shown to me on some sort of, I think it was some sort of